So one thing I love about these lake beds, I'm cruising about 65, 70 across it, and it's just about like driving on pavement, except the wind, now the wind is hella blowing out here. Of all of the desert landscape features that I experience in my travels, one that's consistently fascinating to me are the dry, hard, smooth pans of the prehistoric dry lakes that I come across. It was easy for me to kill a couple of hours exploring the pan itself as well as the surrounding dunes. But eventually, I had to move on and start working my way north towards where I would make my next camp. One of the things I love the most about extended desert overland trips is just the sheer variety of terrain I get to see. As I worked my way north, the wide open valley that the lake bed was located in eventually started giving way to some gently rolling terrain. Soon after that, the terrain started to get more and more severe as I got higher in a pretty good sized range of hills. Eventually, I ended up picking my way through a series of slot canyons to break up over a narrow pass and get my first glimpse of the big basin on the other side. And that basin would be the one where I would hope to make my camp that night. Alright guys, I love this area in here, but it is still way too wet out on this playa, so I wanted to push through and get around the other side of it, but I'm just hitting too much mud. There's just not going to be any way I'm going to make it. So I'm going to have to camp up here on this side of the playa, which is not optimal. We'll have a nice sunset tonight, but we won't have as nice of a sunrise in the morning. And I've actually been somewhat close to this place. But anyway, the good news is it's not even 5 o'clock yet. And we can probably just whip around over here to the other side of the playa and get us a place to camp. All right, well, here comes this famous southeastern Oregon wind. So sometimes things just don't work out the way you want them to. I wanted to get across to the other side of the lake where I'd be backed up against that rim, and then I also wanted to explore that because I've never really been to that other side. But I got halfway over there, and there's a whole series of springs that come out of the hillside, and well, to make a long story short, I got to the point where I just couldn't risk going any further. I was into some pretty good mud. So I'm back over here to a spot that I've actually camped at before. The problem is with this wind, it's going to be a challenge to do any cooking over the fire, which is what I was hoping to do tonight. So this is the Tibetan L-shaped fire, or the Mongols call it a J-shaped fire. I think it just has to do with their alphabets being different and how they perceive the shape as relative to the letters of their alphabet. But the functional aspect of this type of a fire is it allows me to grill over here, nice and sheltered out of the wind, and it allows me to keep building coals over here by burning wood. So it's a really good way. Even the wood that I'm burning here is heating the area where I'm cooking in. So this will give me a nice hot cooking fire in these really windy conditions. And really any bushcrafter worth their salt should be really familiar with how to build this fire pit. For the most part, some clouds have come in, the wind's picking up. God, I see some pretty good clouds coming in out there. So I don't know, I can't quite tell if they're building up to be a storm or not, but I could get a little rain tonight, or at very least it could be a windy night. All right, guys, well, this didn't turn out quite as amazing as I'd hoped, but still actually very good, not bad. I tried a little piece of the steak and it's came out actually all right. Just a touch more done than I like, But man, that was tough cooking with that wind blowing. But the vegetables are nice and tender. And the good news is, after a day like today, it doesn't have to be excellent food for it to taste good to me. But actually, that is really good. That steak's quite amazing. One of the nice things about this wood that I used out here is it doesn't burn for a long time and it doesn't make great coals. So I was dealing with a little bit more flame than I would like, but the flip side is the smoke from it is really mild. So it actually gives the meat kind of a nice flavor, a little bit of a mesquite type of a flavor. I'm sure I say this in every video, but life just doesn't get any better than this. I've got this amazing view of the Steens. There's one more little range in between me and the Steens Mountain, so I can just see the top of the Steens over the ridgeline on the other side of this playa from me. So the view is just incredible. The sky looks amazing. And this huge playa out in front of me. Oh, all right, I just did pretty much a complete sponge bath right here in front of the fire. Of course, that was way too hot for YouTube, so sorry you guys had to miss out on that, but man, I feel a lot better. Got all of the trail dust washed off of me, and I'm thinking I'm just gonna chill here by the fire for a little bit until it burns down, and then I'm gonna crawl up in the rooftop tent and go to sleep. It's actually not super late, but I was up pretty late last night. I'm running on probably 5 hours of sleep or so, well, I get to try out this 49 Odyssey Series tent in the wind, it seems like. All right, guys, well, I'm beat. I'm gonna hit the hay. It's a little bit windy out there. Actually, it's decently windy out there. Definitely not the strongest wind I've been in. So far, the tent's not too noisy, which I like. Some of them can be pretty noisy in the wind, but this one, I mean, you can hear it a little bit, but it's not too bad. So, and there's not a lot of movement. I think it's going to do all right. I just did a little map recon and kind of got my route and everything all figured out for tomorrow. So I'm just going to read a little bit now, and then I'll probably just fade off to sleep. So that's all for this day, guys. Coyote Works out. I'll see you in the morning for coffee. I don't know if you guys can hear this, but it sounds like a freaking jet plane taking off out there. Well, I guess I'll get the answer to the question of how well this tent holds up in the wind. Hopefully it's not going to do this all night long, or that's going to make it rough getting a decent night's sleep for sure. Well, this wind is just not letting up. It's just blowing crazy hard out there. I tell you though, man, I'm really impressed with this Odyssey Series hardshell tent, man. This thing is, I mean, it's making some noise, but it's not even close to what some of the other tents that I've used in the past. Good morning, princesses. Wow, well, I got some sleep last night, but it was a little rough, man. The wind blew, and then it even started sprinkling rain, which was blowing against the tent, but nothing came inside the tent. And one thing is, I'm really impressed with how the tent held up in that wind. You guys know the drill. I am going to have some coffee, probably have my first little part of a snack. I'm gonna get out there and take some pictures and some video, make a good breakfast, and get off and do some more exploring today. Alright, I don't mind telling you guys, it is chilly this morning. It's funny because it definitely didn't get as cold last night, but man, that temperature is dropping this morning. There is an icy bite to that breeze. Just finishing my first little thing of coffee. As soon as I get done with that, I'll start boiling some water, make some more coffee, then we'll start working on breakfast. Alright, so first things first, got some water boiling. I'm going to make up a nice strong cup of coffee, and then we're going to do one of the classic camp meals, which is a breakfast skillet. This one's going to be real simple. I did dice up some green peppers and some onions at home just so I have a little bit of fresh ingredients for it. We've got some frozen, this time I grabbed these Idaho grown frozen cubed potatoes, a little breakfast sausage, and a couple of eggs. So we're just going to toss that all in a skillet, add some spices to it, maybe some Johnny seasoning, and we'll have ourselves a breakfast. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is put a little butter in my pan, and then right on top of that butter, I'm going to put some of my peppers and onions. And I'm going to saute those peppers and onions just for a quick couple of minutes, and then we'll add in the sausage. Alright, while my sausage is browning up, made me a nice latte. That's amazing. And I got myself a cup full of ice right here. So I'm going to make, this is my iced latte for the road. Alright, so this is my road coffee. I'll stick it in the Jeep. Put a little hand sanitizer on my hands. Kill any E. coli or anything I might have got from handling that sausage. Alright, so I've got a delicious scramble, easy classic camp meal. I've got my Rise Nitro Cold Brew Classic Latte in a can right here as my breakfast beverage of choice. That's perfect. That's all a guy needs out here. You know, one thing that's really nice out here that I've learned over the years is you don't necessarily have to cook every meal out of all fresh ingredients, but it sure is nice to have at least one meal a day I like to have that has some fresh ingredients. And then another thing that gets to be in short supply out here is vegetables, fresh vegetables. So even taking something like a breakfast like this, that's basically eggs, potatoes, and sausage, or oftentimes eggs, potato, and bacon, and just taking the time to bring those fresh green peppers and those fresh onions to saute in with it really makes a difference in how it tastes and gives you that extra nutritional value. God, it's just gorgeous here. What a view to be eating breakfast to. God, I gotta tell you guys, man, that breakfast was incredible. It's just too beautiful, and the playa down there is beckoning me, so I'm gonna go on a little walk down to the edge of it. Alright, so this is really interesting. It's a little pile of stones right here. I'm about a half a mile away from the Jeep, which is about a half a mile away from this really old track that I followed in here. So what is this pile of rocks doing right here? So we're down not quite to the edge of the playa. I don't see any charcoal, although I'm going to dig around a little bit and see if it was a fire ring. It doesn't seem like a likely place for a grave. So we're going to look around and see if we can find any more clues that might tell us what this is. All right, well, I didn't find any more clues about what this pile of rocks is, but I did find a horned toad, which number one is pretty cool, but number two tells me that the temperature is warm enough out here for reptiles, so that means I need to be watching pretty close for rattlesnakes. All right, well, we might actually be getting onto something here. Here is a flat stone, but it just has the look of having been worn flat here from rubbing on it. So this could potentially be a grinding stone left over from the natives. I also found this chunk of obsidian about 2 feet from it. So, is that pile of rocks a grave? Is it marking a campsite? Is it marking a good hunting site? It was not too far off of a pretty well-worn game trail. But I'm guessing that pile of rocks has something to do with these artifacts right here. This is crazy how the ground and the soil totally changed down here. So I'm where this little kind of wash empties out into the playa, and number one, it's wet, which is crazy. But number two, there's a lot of salt in the water. So you can see there's just salt crystals all over the ground here. Alright, so here's another one of these. What in God's name is an old 50-gallon drum doing sitting out here in the middle of freaking nowhere? God, I don't even know how somebody... There's something in that barrel. I'm not even honestly sure how this barrel would have gotten here, except for maybe on a really dry year somebody drove across the playa, but again, I don't see anything else close to it. No cans. I mean, this would have been a great spot to camp. It could have been some kind of a military camp on a training exercise. I did find a 50 caliber shell casing up on the side of that hill the last time I was out in this area, but that was, you know, a mile or two away. Another one of these mysteries of the desert. Yeah, this is crazy. Right where I'm standing, this is soft. We've got this hard layer of crust on the top, but it's actually mud underneath. Woo! It's getting warm out there. Hey, just so you guys know, I did have a couple of bottles of water in my dump pouch for that walk. And then, of course, I've got knife and stuff to make fire with on my person. And it's a good thing because it's a lot farther to the edge of that playa than it looks like from here. And this light breeze out here, and even though it doesn't feel extremely hot, out here the relative humidity is so low, the air is so dry, that it's amazing how much moisture just this light breeze is wicking out of your body. So important to stay hydrated a bunch out here. Ooh, it's nice sitting up here in the rooftop tent. Got a good little cross breeze coming through here. To leave this spot, man. Tough to do it. It would be easy right now to just crawl up inside the rooftop tent, lay on top of my sleeping bag, have a little afternoon nap, enjoy this spot a little bit longer, but we got places to go, things to do, man. There's a whole world out there to be discovered. Every once in a while, it's nice to just hang out and relax and camp, but the reality is, for the most part, I hardly ever do that. Every once in a while, I can convince myself to, and really mostly like in the summertime when it's really hot during the middle of the day. Other than that, while I'm still young and I got my health, I just want to see as much country as I can. Someday I'll be too old to put in the kind of miles that I put in now to hike the amount of miles I like to hike. And that'll be when I'll slow down and start taking a nap. One thing I love about this tent is just how easy it is to stow. I just reach up and grab the cover, pull down. As it comes down, I tuck everything inside nicely. Once it's folded down, it's just a matter of doing these 4 latches. 1, 2, 3. That's it. The rooftop tent's all buttoned up. I still had a couple of high priority objectives for the trip, but the first thing that I would need to do is cross that entire basin, work my way out the other side, and head up into a nearby mountain range. It never ceases to amaze me some of the unlikely things that I find out in the middle of the desert. I found myself stopping to observe this little family of ducks that had taken up residence on this isolated little water hole about halfway across that basin. Alright, so I'm climbing up out of the basin. I'm going up this slot canyon. I'm headed up to a series of little basins that are quite a bit higher elevation. Now, a couple of them I've been to. There's probably a dozen or more playas up here of varying different sizes. And it's a little sketchy going up in here on my own. And this road's pretty narrow, but so far it's not terrible. The rocks on it aren't so bad that I'm constantly worried about blowing a sidewall out of my tire. So I think we're just going to keep picking our way up here, because man, it should be absolutely amazing if we get up in this country. When I finally finished my ascent and broke up over that last saddle, I found myself nestled in the high glacier-cut valleys of the Sheepshead Mountains. In most of Central Oregon, the terrain is cut by water. The rivers and streams over hundreds and thousands of years cut these sharp V-shaped ravines and canyons in the landscape. The valleys will typically narrow towards the bottom, oftentimes at the very bottom being not much wider than the stream that's cutting through them. The peaks, on the other hand, tend to rise tall and pointed. This country is unique in that it's carved by thousands of years of glacial movement. Glaciers expanding, receding, and slowly moving across the landscape, creating these wide, U-shaped open valleys with glacial moraines and oftentimes small playas in the bottom. After driving for several hours through the unique landscape, I eventually crossed the mountain range and dropped down the other side. The time was drawing near for me to make one last stop that I'd been looking forward to for the entire trip. It was going to require some walking, but I was bound and determined to find one last historic site that had been on my list to see if I could find for years. Alright guys, I'm trying to track down this old stage stop, and I see the remains of some structures up there, but I wanted to get a feel. This should have been a pretty sizable little community built up around it. And I'm about a quarter of a mile away from it and saw a stovepipe, my first sign. Some kind of an old tin, another clue. Because there was a stovepipe, that makes me think we're probably close to where there was an old building. Old style tin can with the lead solder in the base of it. All right, I just found this actual metal old oil can from Phillips 66. So here's what I'm thinking here. So what the story is this little spot right here is just a little ways from where the stage stop and station and later store was. This is a nice flat spot, and it's just about a quarter of a mile from there. So what I think is, I think this was a good place for people to camp, just close enough to the store that they could get some things, but not in the actual yard of the store. So this is fairly common back in the days before cars and then in the early years of the automobile. So this road that I've been following would still have been used all the way up into the era of some of the earliest cars. And then not too long after that, it was actually rerouted and moved over, in some places a quarter mile, in some places a half a mile to make a more direct route. Well, I picked up a whiskey bottle. It's not extremely old. I think it is from, maybe like the 50s or the 60s, which is interesting because I was trying to figure out how late this road maybe was used until. And here's another bottle. I think this is a little bit older than that whiskey bottle. It does make sense, these bottles, and it's cool that I'm finding whole ones, but it does make sense I'd be finding these bottles in an area where people kind of camped by the station. This is actually a horse-drawn wagon of some sort. Don't know if the camera's picking this up, but right in this area here, there's just broken glass and porcelain everywhere. And some of it is definitely Depression era glass or older, and some of it is melted. So I'm thinking at one point there was a building here that burned to the ground. So this is really interesting. This structure right here, which I'm guessing was the store, had was a long, narrow building. It had this just massive rock and masonry wall on the front, constructed out of local rock as well as chinked in with mud. And then it had a partial stone wall along the backside, but I think the backside was primarily timber. And because I can see all the old timbers here. So the cool thing is this didn't burn. The interesting thing is, there's a square nail right there. Dang it, I can't get it out. So it's interesting, this must have been the actual store, this building right here. Because of the way it's constructed, this long and narrow, it wouldn't have been very practical as a house. But man, it was probably 150 feet long or something. There's a massive, big old dead cottonwood tree right there, or it might be a poplar. So this was a small structure right here, but man, a lot went into building it. It's built out of these really thin flagstones. It's so hard to tell what it was, but it looks like it might actually had a stone floor in it too. This was a really solid building here too. It looks like probably a house. I see a down wooden structure over there. So there was probably, the earliest structures were probably these stone structures, and then in later years when the route got better and transportation got better, they would have brought timber in to build lumber buildings and grow the station. Wow, guys, check this out. Oh, it is this cool old bed frame. That is so cool. After leaving the site of the old station, I continued heading north where I would eventually hit the pavement. Alright, well, I finally hit a highway, so this is the highway heading back west to Crane, and then ultimately on to Burns. So I'm going to go ahead and dump a little bit of fuel in my rig, and I'm going to take this Rotopack skim that I have up on the roof and dump this one first because it's the easiest to get to. So this has got something like 3.6 gallons in it. So hopefully this will be enough to get me to Burns, which I don't know how far it is, but I've got about a quarter of a tank plus this 3.6 gallons. I'm guessing this will get me there. As I began the last stretch of my trip, which would be about 6.5 hours on the pavement back to my home, I did what I always do. I started reflecting on the trip. Ultimately, I traveled around 130 miles off pavement. I hadn't seen another person in 4 days, and I'd seen desert landscapes that ranged from dry prehistoric lake beds, wide open basin and range topography, all the way to high mountain glacial cut valleys. I visited a couple of historic sites that I'd had on my list for a long time, and I saw a bunch of country that I'd never seen before. So ultimately, it was a pretty amazing trip. I hope you guys enjoyed joining me for it. I know, as always, I sure enjoyed having you along. I look forward to your comments, your questions, and above all, I'll look forward to seeing y'all on the next one. Coyote Works, out.